It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome hour number 2. Thank you so much for being with us today. The phone number 870-275-9799, broadcasting across Arkansas on terrific stations. We really appreciate everybody who's out there listening, but we're also broadcasting on our YouTube channel. Go to Conduit News, subscribe, and click the bell to receive notifications, as well as over at facebook.com/Conduit News. We are in the middle of our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. There was a bill that passed out of committee yesterday. This bill would increase the threshold for buying a used vehicle, the price of a used vehicle, and not having to pay the tax, sales tax on a used vehicle. Meaning right now it's lower than one sponsor, State Representative John Payton, would want it to be. So this would be a big, huge tax relief for the people out there shopping for used vehicles. The sponsor, State Representative John Payton, joins me on the phone now. John, good morning to you.
Good morning. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. I know we've had you on to talk about the idea behind this legislation before. It's good to see this bill getting some movement and getting out of committee yesterday.
It is. I really appreciate you having me on this morning. So we did advance it in committee. It'll be on the House floor. We have 82 House co-sponsors, so we should have plenty of votes to get it through the House, and then they'll head over to the Senate. And of course, it's bringing relief. The biggest obstacle we faced is this is not a revenue neutral bill. It actually has a cost. It's going to cut revenue by $12 million. And so, they're asking me, how we're going to pay for it, which is a lot of people's, favorite phrase on cutting taxes. But revenue growth has been robust. From 17 to 18, it was $168 million revenue growth. And over the last 8 years, it's averaged over $100 million a year. So I'm telling them that we're going to pay for it out of growth, out of revenue growth. And so that's the biggest hurdle we face. And we need people contacting their senators because it just, we tax used cars over and over and over again. And this stops when they reach a value below $7,500. But for the most part, that means that the car's already been taxed 3 or 4 times,
Mm-hmm. So your bill would raise the threshold from where to where?
So currently, when a vehicle reaches a value below $4,000, then we don't tax it. This would raise that to $7,500. So the FNA's estimated revenue impact is $12 million.
State Representative Payton, this entire session, I feel like, has been, I guess, one of the default positions of some is that there is absolutely no way to absorb a tax cut without raising a tax somewhere else.
I really don't know how we fell into that mindset, but that's the truth. I mean, I got elected in 2013, and since I've been there, we've cut, on the cutting side, $500 million plus, and still our revenue growth is $500 million more in 18 than it was in 13. So, I don't think we have a revenue problem. I think we have a priority problem. But, for those Arkansans that drive inexpensive vehicles, and of course, there are people that buy new vehicles, but everybody drives a used one. And for those that are on a tight budget, when you go to buy a vehicle, you have to make a down payment. You have to get your insurance in effect, which costs money. Then 30 days down the road, you've got your first payment due. And so when it comes to registering and paying that sales tax, that's another $400 or $500 out of your pocket when you're buying a $7,000 vehicle. And I think once we've taxed that automobile 3 or 4 or 5 times or more, it's time to let it go and quit trying to collect the tax. After all, we collect property tax every year anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's exactly right. That's another whole thing.
On the same automobile. So, you're taxed when you earn the money, you're taxed when you spend the money, and you're taxed on everything you bought with it every year.
Unbelievable. Have you gotten any pushback at all? And I think you might if people get desperate. But I know you've disclosed this. You are, as a profession, in the car business, and I know you've disclosed that. You get any pushback on that?
Yeah. No, I didn't. And of course, I kind of got a few surprised looks in committee because I'm one of only two members in the House that does not pay sales tax on used cars. And so the jaw dropped. And I'm like, because I'm a used car dealer, I don't pay the tax. I can put a dealer tag on and drive the automobile without registering and paying a tax on it. So, I understand that people may think that it's because I'm a car dealer. Well, it's because I'm very familiar with those situations where people are trying to buy transportation. They need dependable transportation in order to get a job in Arkansas. It's a rural state. You really can't catch a bus or walk to work in most places. You need transportation. And if we're going to have dependable employees, they need a dependable ride to work. And so, I've seen those situations where it's so hard on people's budget to try to, shake loose enough cash to make the down payment, get the insurance, and then the sales tax hits them 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road because they have 30 days to pay the sales tax. Well, then the first payment rolls around and they've just, for the last 30 days, they've had all of their cash, sucked out of their pocket. And it makes it very hard on struggling families.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up at the end there, struggling families. This is a pro-family piece of legislation because this is enabling, this is for your working families out there who do live paycheck to paycheck. This is a huge, huge thing if this were to go into law.
I think that's absolutely who's going to benefit the most. Now, I'm not usually for carving out segments of the population to get benefits. So, it's available to anybody that wants to buy the vehicle. They don't have to be a struggling family. And as you know, there are some very successful people that choose to drive less expensive vehicles and maybe buying it for a child that's going off to college or buying it. I've had several people come in to buy vehicles for their employees that needed a ride. So, anybody can take advantage of it, but I do think, it helps the struggling families.
Let me ask you this.
More than anything.
Let me ask you this. As a car dealer and a legislator, why aren't we taxing cars twice at all? Why not pay sales tax the first time you buy a car new?
Well, and it's a long story it goes back beyond 1991, but 91 is when Bill Clinton's administration passed the tax that was for all used cars. But what had happened is we had taxed new vehicles and not used ones for many years. And the theory was, we only need to collect tax once. Well, they realized out-of-state vehicles coming into Arkansas, we didn't get the once. And so what they would do is if it came into Arkansas on an out-of-state title, they would collect sales tax one time. And so used vehicles that had an Arkansas title would not be collected. And if they had an out-of-state title, they got collected that one time. Well, the state of Arkansas was sued, and that was an import tax, which is unconstitutional. And so when the state of Arkansas lost that lawsuit, Bill Clinton's answer was, we'll tax all used cars every time.
And here we are. Here we are now. Okay. Well, I appreciate that there's an exemption at all. Again, right now below 4,000, but this would take it 7,500 and below, right? Again.
That's correct.
Wow.
And the exemption had, several years back, we got the exemption passed at 2,500, and then about 5 or 6 years, I guess it's about 8 years ago, maybe, we raised it to 4,000. And of course, vehicles increased in value, and after that cash for clunkers fiasco, well, we suffered a lot of appreciation, but inflation, a lot of inflation in the cheap used car market. And so, it really takes 7,000 or 7,500, to get a good, dependable ride. And I think, people trying to get on their feet and get a new job or whatever, they need dependable transportation.
Absolutely. Again, we're talking with State Representative John Payton. This is a great piece of legislation. You need to call your senators because this is with 83 co-sponsors in the House. This is going to sail through. You need to call your senators and you need to tell them, hey, we want you to pass this piece of legislation. We know it's going to cost $12 million. We can absorb that. Now, on that note, Representative Payton, when it came to the highway funding bill, there were tax increases, straight up or down tax increases that raised the cost of gas at the pump for the people, as well as referring a constitutional amendment to keep a half-cent sales tax that's set to expire. Now, you went to the floor, I believe, to speak against it, and you just basically said, we don't need to be doing this because we've had $500 million of revenue growth in a very short amount of time, and we could just use the increase in revenue that we're already getting from the people to pay for our roads. But that kind of fell on deaf ears, didn't it?
It did. And, of course, you know, like I said, I got elected in 2013, and there was a proposal that year by John. Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank on his last name. But anyway,
Jonathan Barnett. You're talking about Jonathan Barnett?
Yeah, Jonathan Barnett.
Yep.
And so, you know, that proposal would have taken revenue growth and put it to the highways. And now, 6 years later, that problem would have been solved because we've had the revenue growth that would have taken care of the highways. But it was, you know, it was rejected. And I was just trying to make the point using these same numbers about revenue growth. You know, we do not need new taxes. We just need to prioritize the money that we're getting in, and we don't even have to take any money away from anything. Just divert the revenue growth. So, you know, it's been averaging for the last 8 years over $100 million a year in revenue growth. That could have been all diverted to highways.
Do you think that it's because, like you said, in this case, in this scenario, you wouldn't even have to take any revenue from anywhere. You could just do it with the growth in revenue from the people that's just naturally coming in because of, you know, the economy. Do you think, though, that there are places? I mean, right now, I think it's interesting that, I mean, there hasn't really been anything proposed about maybe cutting 1% from each, you know, agency. I mean, is that true? Is there really nowhere in state government? Are we really expected to believe there's nowhere where there's fat to be trimmed?
I just cannot believe that anybody believes that. There are some people that argue it, but you know, anybody that has run a business or a budget, I mean, you pretty much know that you have some luxuries in there that you could trim to achieve 1% or more. And then the bigger the budget is, the more opportunity you probably have to find that. And so obviously I believe there are efficiencies that could be found. It takes desire to do that. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, you know, the desire to be friendly and not make waves overrides the desire to cut those budgets. So
I got one more question, and I know we weren't scheduled to talk about this, but I did text you privately about it. Charles Blake has this bill that would, you know, redesignate one star on the Arkansas flag from the Confederacy to Native American tribes, I think. I got a tweet I'm looking at from Jesse Tenur that Charles Blake added bipartisan co-sponsors, Republican Jimmy Gasway and Senator Breann Davis, now on board with this plan to redesignate the star. I know this failed at a committee. It's a committee that you're on miserably. Do you think this has a chance of now passing?
Well, I've not heard anything from my colleagues in that committee that would give me the indication that it's gained any votes. And, you know, we listened to the arguments for a little over an hour, and it only received, I think it was 4 or 5 yes votes out of a committee of 20. And so, you know, we actually made a motion to table it rather than spend another hour because our agenda is quite long and there's bills that have not been heard. And so we were able to table it. Well, he filed another one that's very similar. And I don't know if it's going to come up to be heard in the next day or two, but you know, as far as my communications with other committee members, I don't know where he's gained any votes yet.
Interesting.
To pass that.
Well, yeah, to me, I kind of feel like I feel like the editing of history is very similar to taking down Confederate statues. I just don't know what that would accomplish in terms of solving.
Well, and for me, it doesn't matter whether it's Confederate or what it is, religious in nature. But when generations before us set up a memorial to be honored I feel like we have an obligation to do that. 3 or 4 generations from now, they may not agree with all of our thoughts and insight, but they should respect something if we set up a memorial. I don't know. Sometimes, you can take a memorial that maybe to somebody is very negative and use it as a learning experience, just like the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. People look back at that and say, never again, we're not going to do that. So just because it's a memorial that has to do with Civil War and a time in our country where we were so divided and came to war over it, I mean, doesn't matter which side you're on. You really should not ignore that point in history and all the things that divided us and brought us to that point. Because, I mean, literally today we have issues that are dividing us as much as the issues of that day did. And we need to learn those lessons from the past of how to learn to disagree without dividing our country. Because, in the world's environment today, if we had a civil war and were divided like that, both sides would lose because we'd lose our country to foreign forces.
Yeah. State Representative John Payton, it's always great to have you on, sir. I really appreciate the work you're doing, especially on this bill that would give tax relief to a lot of people who are looking to buy used vehicles.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you having me on.
Have a great day, sir. Folks, it's State Representative John Payton. Again, his bill that would raise the threshold from right below $4,000 to $7,500. So if you were in the market for a used car, right now the law says if it's less than $4,000, you don't have to pay sales tax. Well, that's not too. You're not going to get a very good car for that amount of money. But for $7,500 or less, that's a pretty good deal. No sales tax on a car that you pay $7,500 for. Okay, and this is now passed the House committee. It's got 80 co-sponsors. It's going to basically guaranteed to move on to the Senate, which means you need to be contacting your senators and you need to be asking them, yes, it has a price tag of $12 million, but we keep increasing spending in this state, $133 million one year, $140 the next, $160 the next, $170 after that. That's the record of the last 4 years of how much we have increased spending from one year to the next. It's $500 million. So surely we can afford $12 million to give tax relief to people who are out there in that used car market.